Hello, my name is Bob Johnson and I work for Micro Focus as a technical support engineer. I support the iPrint product, and in this video we're going to talk about iPrint printer driver profiles. The purpose of a printer driver profile is that it allows you as the iPrint administrator the ability to configure driver defaults that will be set when the iPrint printer is installed. Some of the more common settings are paper size, paper type, color versus black and white printing, the paper source, and duplex printing. Possible use case scenarios for using printer driver profiles would be in situations where you may have a single physical printer in your environment that is shared by multiple departments. Technically, you could create a unique printer agent for every department and associate a printer driver profile to that particular printer agent that had department-specific configuration settings. You may have a printer with multiple configuration options, in which case you could create a unique iPrint printer that represented each configuration option, and then create a printer driver profile for each configuration option and associate it to the applicable iPrint printer. And you may have a situation where you have multiple printers of the same model requiring a standard configuration, and in that case you could create a single printer driver profile and associate it to each of the iPrint printer agents that you've created in your environment. We assume in this video that you have a functioning iPrint environment. And like the driver upload process, you'll need to run Internet Explorer as administrator from a Windows PC. The other thing to note is that this process is Windows operating system dependent, meaning that if I need to create a printer driver profile for a Windows 7 printer driver, I'll need to do this on a Windows 7 PC. And this applies to 32-bit and 64-bit operating systems, which means you'll need to have access to a PC for each of the operating systems in your environment. It's also required that you have the iPrint client installed on the PC that you'll use for managing and creating printer driver profiles. My lab environment for this demonstration consists of the iPrint Appliance version 4.1.4. I have the iPrint client 6.21.04 installed on both the client and the admin PCs, which are running a 64-bit version of Windows 10. In this demonstration, we'll go through the process of creating a printer driver profile. We'll assign the printer driver profile to an iPrint printer. We'll go through the process of installing an iPrint printer with the assigned PDP, and then we'll go through the process of updating an already installed iPrint printer with the settings from a PDP. And then we'll briefly touch on managing a PDP, and we'll demonstrate deleting a PDP. As mentioned in the requirements, the first thing we need to do is run Internet Explorer as administrator. The URL we need to use in order to access iManager is the IP address or DNS name of your iPrint appliance or iPrint server, followed by a /NPS. At this point, you'll log in as admin. And then the first thing we'll do is go to the printer driver profile option. We're required to select a print manager name. And then the operation is create printer driver profile. And for this demonstration, we'll use the HP Color LaserJet Pro. We'll give it a name. This option is used if you know your printer supports bidirectional communication, and by selecting this, what will happen is during the printer driver profile creation process, there will be a query sent to the printer in order to learn about the features available for this particular printer. And it does require that we specify an iPrint printer that has already been configured and associated with that particular driver. This is something you would have done earlier as an administrator. Click Next. At this point, the PDP creation process loads the printer preferences for the driver we're working with. And what we see here are the default settings for this particular driver. For the purpose of this demonstration, we'll change the paper size to legal. We'll change the paper source to tray 1. We will select a plain paper type. Click OK. And at this point, the settings are being written to the printer driver profile. Depending on the driver, this process may take a few minutes. This screen is just a summary showing the print manager, driver store, and operating system. We'll click Next, and then we get the status showing that the PDP was created successfully. Click OK. The next thing we have to do is we actually need to associate this printer driver profile to a printer. So we click Manage Printer, browse to our printer object, click OK, and then we click the Drivers tab. We need to change to our current operating system. And notice we've already associated this driver to this printer agent. Again, this is something you would have done earlier when you configured your iPrint environment. And now, as expected, we see the printer driver profile that we created earlier. We can click on that and click Apply. And OK. And now what we would expect to happen is when a user installs this printer, the settings from the PDP will be applied, and we'll demonstrate that now. So now that we have our printer driver profile created and associated to our iPrint printer agent, we'll go ahead and install this printer, and then we'll take a look at the printer preferences to make sure the settings from our PDP actually got applied. So in the iPrint portal, we'll click on the printer agent, click Install. Yes. Now that the printer's been installed, we can go into printers and scanners, and we can check the preferences of this particular printer. And we can see that the settings from the PDP have been applied. In the driver, when we were creating the PDP, we did not have an option to lock the setting. So a user can come in and change these settings from what we had configured in the PDP. In this next part of the demonstration, we're going to discuss the process of getting the printer driver profile settings pushed out to an iPrint printer that's already been installed on a workstation. We're going to combine that discussion with managing a printer driver profile and deleting a printer driver profile, and talk about what happens in those situations as well. In the case of each of these scenarios, there is a common process that occurs, and that is a timestamp is updated in the iPrint database. However, by default, the process for comparing this timestamp in the database to the timestamp that is on the PC, this is not enabled. There's a setting called Auto Driver Profile Update, which we need to enable, and this is done in iManager, and we'll do that now. In iManager, we'll go to the iPrint section. We'll choose the option to manage Print Manager, and then we need to browse to the Print Manager object. Click OK. The setting we're looking for is under the Printer Agents tab, and we will enable Auto Driver Profile Update for our HP color printer agent that we've been testing with. We click Apply and OK. With this setting enabled, the next time a PC restarts, the iPrint client will check for the presence of this setting, and since it is enabled, the next thing it will do is compare the timestamp in the PC's registry to the timestamp in the database. And if there's a difference, it's going to trigger an uninstall and reinstall of the printer with the new settings. In our current configuration, the timestamps match, but we're going to edit our printer driver profile, and then we'll take a look at what happens when a PC restarts. So we'll go back to printer driver profile, select our print manager. This time we're going to choose the option to modify a printer driver profile. Click OK. We select our profile and click Next. And then we browse to the printer this has been associated to and click Next. And then it's going to go through the process of loading the preferences again. And let's change our paper size to letter, and we'll set the tray back to auto select, and let's say we're going to use the HP Echo Smart Light paper type, and we'll click OK and click Next, and then we click OK. The next thing we'll demonstrate is the process the iPrint client goes through when the PC restarts and the iPrint client detects a difference in the timestamps. All right, to demonstrate what happens, we'll go ahead and restart this PC. Note, right at the beginning, the user gets a notification that the administrator has modified a driver/profile. The user will then click OK. And as mentioned, it goes through an uninstall and reinstall of the printer and gives the user notification that the printer has been updated. Now, if we go back to printers and scanners, and we look at the preferences, we see that the paper size has been set back to letter, and our source is auto select, and our paper type is the HP Echo Smart Light. One of the requests we get in support is, can we minimize user interaction? And you noticed in this latest demonstration, the user had to respond twice to prompts that occurred because of this updated printer driver profile. We do have a way to suppress those messages, and we can do that by editing the iPrint.ini file on your iPrint server or iPrint appliance, and I'll walk through that process next. In this next session, we'll talk about the method for suppressing the messages that users receive when changes to the printer driver profile are made, or when a printer driver profile is introduced into the environment. To start with, you're going to need an SSH client of your choice. For this demonstration, we're going to use the Bitvice client. You also need to make sure SSH is running on your iPrint server. We'll demonstrate how to do this on the iPrint appliance and on an OES server. Once we have our SSH client and we've enabled SSH on the appliance and or the OES server, we're going to locate the var opt novel iPrint htdocs iprint.ini file. And the specific setting we're going to be changing is the inform user of updates. By default, this setting is set to 1, but we'll change it to 0 to suppress the messages. To enable SSH on the iPrint appliance, you'll need to log into the 9443 interface as VA admin. So specifying the IP address or DNS name of your appliance followed by a :9443, you'll get to the appliance administration page. You'll select System Services, highlight SSH, and then select Action Start. With SSH running on the appliance, we can now use our SSH client to make the change to the iPrint.ini. To enable SSH on your OES server, you'll go into YAST. You'll select the firewall option. Click on Allowed Services and drop down the Service to Allow list. Choose Secure Shell Server. Click Add, Next, and Finish. And now that SSH has been enabled on the OES server, we can use an SSH client to access the iPrint.ini. As the iPrint.ini is located in the same directory on an iPrint appliance as in an OES server, for this next section, I'll use the iPrint appliance in the example of locating and editing the iPrint.ini. I've connected to my iPrint appliance with the Bitvice SSH client. I'm going to go to the var opt novel iPrint htdocs directory, and there you'll find the iPrint.ini file. I'm going to edit the file, and I'm going to locate the inform user of update section and change the setting from 1 to 0. Save the change. One thing to note about making changes in the iPrint.ini file, there are no services that need to be restarted. In the next part of the demonstration, we will make a change to the printer driver profile we've been working with, and we'll restart the Windows 10 PC we've been using to verify that the PDP setting gets updated without any user intervention. As demonstrated earlier, I run Internet Explorer as administrator, and I go to the iPrint section, select Printer Driver Profile, select the Print Manager object. We're going to choose Modify Printer Driver Profile, select our PDP, select the printer agent object that was associated with this PDP. Click Next, and it's loading the driver configuration like we saw before. And let's make a change to the paper type. We'll say we're going to use HP LaserJet 90G. Click OK. And we click Next. As mentioned, I'm editing the video to reduce the amount of time, but the process of modifying or creating a PDP can take some time depending on the driver. And we click OK. And now we'll take a look at the Windows 10 PC we've been using for this demonstration. So back on the Windows 10 PC we've been using, let's go to Printers and Scanners, and let's take a look at the current paper type selection. Go to Manage, Printing Preferences, and the paper type is set to the HP EcoSmart Lite, which was the setting prior to this last change we made. Go ahead and click OK. And now let's restart this PC. And we'll take a look at whether or not the new PDP setting gets applied without any of the messages. All right, let's take a look at the PC to see if the change we made has been applied. And we can see that the paper type now has been updated to the HP LaserJet 90G. The last thing I'll demonstrate is how to delete a printer driver profile. So running Internet Explorer as administrator, I'll go to iManager, click iPrint, click printer driver profile, select the print manager, and choose the option to delete a printer driver profile. Click OK. Select our printer driver profile and click Next. I intentionally left the association of the printer driver profile to the printer agent just so that you would see this particular message. And this is just a warning letting you know that there are still printer agents with this printer driver profile associated to it. And you'll notice there's an option that says click here to see a list of printer agents and their associated profiles. What this does is it launches a page called the PSM status page, which you may or may not have used in your environment. We'll click this option just to show you briefly what you can see. And here it brings up our printer agent and the name of our printer driver profile. So with that information, you would go back into iManager, back to Manage Printer, select the printer, click OK, click the Drivers tab, change to our operating system, and then you would set this back to none and apply. Okay, and now we can go back to printer driver profile, and we can choose the delete option, select our printer driver profile, and the PDP has been deleted. Because we removed the association of the printer driver profile to the iPrint printer agent, the timestamp changes on this particular printer agent. The next time a user restarts their workstation, the iPrint client will determine there's a timestamp difference and will update the iPrint printer installed on the PC. I won't demonstrate this, but what happens is the printer driver settings get reset to the defaults. Hopefully you found this information useful, and thank you for watching.